Hi, good morning and welcome to all. I'm Julio Capó and I'm the Deputy Director of the Wolfsonian Public Humanities Lab here at FIU in Miami. Welcome today to episode 2 of season 2 of our webinar, Coffee and Conversations, Museums and Histories of Anti-Blackness. We first started this seminar at the start of the coronavirus pandemic and quarantine some months ago. In order to understand how cultural institutions were handling the changes before us at the time. The pandemic, however, is not at all isolated. Rather, as we continue to see the need to end anti-Black violence, we acknowledge the overlapping pandemics of today, deeply rooted in the past. Today, we're going to emphasize the significance of centering Black lives and experiences in museums and cultural institutions, and the challenges of working against the powers that exist in institutions, of course, and the fields of public history or society more generally, that have historically sought to erase, to marginalize, and to whitewash Black histories and experiences. So today we have an entire Worcester, Massachusetts-based episode. Thank you to our guests for being here. Worcester, by the way, I was kind of just talking to the panelists before this, is the second largest city in the New England region. I knew that was true of Massachusetts, but also the entire New England region. I have the great honor to speak with our 3 distinguished guests. Debbie Hall is the founder of the Worcester Black History Project. Thank you. David Connor is the Director of Community Engagement at the Worcester Historical Museum. And Al Green is the Ministry Director of the LGBT Asylum Task Force, again, all based out of Worcester. So very briefly to our audience, the 4 of us are gonna talk for about 20 minutes, and then we're gonna take questions from the audience for the remaining 10 minutes at the end. At any time, you can submit a question right below the chat button on the bottom of the screen. So let's get going. Welcome. Can you each briefly describe the work that you do and the organizations, the work that you do for your organizations? And the work that your organizations do, I should say. Should we start with you, Debbie?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, by the way, and good morning, everyone. So the Worcester Black History Project was founded in 2018. It's relatively new, really. And it came from a place of just loving Black folks and wanting to know about the history of Black people in this country. And so I have always been interested and wondered what were the contributions that folks made. And New England is a wonderful spot to kind of do that research and discover those things. So I moved to Wistar from St. Louis, Missouri, about 7 years ago. And so I was really interested. I knew about Boston and Portsmouth and all these places that had their own projects going. And I just wondered, what did Black folks do? How did they live in Worcester, right? As the 2nd largest city in New England. And so from there, I went and talked to some of the local scholars who have done some work around Black folks and how they lived here. And Worcester Black History Project was really born out of a desire to serve as kind of an umbrella organization of folks who are doing things in the Worcester area. And we're focused really on oral histories, doing research, collecting artifacts, and partnering with the Worcester Historical Museum to kind of serve as a repository. And as we continue to evolve, that's including programming and relevancy of history that is happening all the time, history that happened a minute ago, this is history, the recording of, and so not just what happened in 19th century New England and Worcester, but what is happening now in terms of Black Lives Matter, all of these movements, and trying to document those things. So that really is the kind of mission of the project right now.
It's incredible. I feel so often people associate, cities like Worcester and so much of New England with the 19th century or something, right? And to talk about our present is also, needing documentation is so critical. Thank you for that. Since of course that partners with you, David, can you talk about, I'll give it to you now.
Sure, thank you for having me. And as Deb said, we've partnered with the Worcester Black History Project. My name is David Connor. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at Worcester Historical Museum. My role consists primarily of working with communities to document community history. Sort of as you said, Julio, it's sort of documenting more recent history. a couple of years ago, we did the Queer History Project of Worcester. We also have the Latino History Project of Worcester, and now the Worcester Black History Project, all at different phases of their existence in the museum and where we are with each project. What we do is we collect oral histories. We interview community members, starting with our elders, on what it's like to be queer, Black, Latino in Worcester. And then we create public programming, exhibits, and annual reports out to the community based off of our findings. These are very community-driven projects. So my role is to work with community members who are active and dedicated to telling these stories.
That's great. Thank you so much, David. Al?
Good morning, and thank you for having us. So the LGBT Asylum Task Force is a ministry of the Hadron Park Congregational Church, UCC. We've been in existence since 2008, providing housing, food, connection to pro bono legal, medical, and mental health resources for LGBTQ people who are fleeing persecution in their home countries. So folks will get here, and it can take sometimes up to 2 years before they can legally work to support themselves, right? And so what the task force and what our church has decided to do is to provide for their basic support, basic needs during that whole duration whilst they're waiting to be able to work and support themselves. Since 2008, we've supported over 300 people from more than 20 of the still in 2020 rather, 70 plus countries where it's illegal to be LGBTQ. And so this is work that we are happy to do, and we realize is much needed for a very marginalized community.
Thank you so much to the three of you for the incredibly important work you're doing. It's so great to hear, and so great to, I mean, I've known about these three projects, but to hear them all collectively also is so powerful. My next question is about coronavirus. I wonder if we could talk about how things at your particular institution and programs have changed since March, and how can our audiences here and beyond help support you and the work you're doing in this difficult time, and one of uncertainty as well. Debbie, can we start with you again?
Sure. So we actually had an exhibit for Black History Month at Worcester Historical Museum. And so midway through that exhibit, COVID-19 hit, and we all kind of had to recollect ourselves and think about things. And so I think for a couple of weeks or more, we were just trying to survive and figure everything out. But then that meant that we still had a month left for that exhibit. And what do we do with that? And everyone didn't get an opportunity to come in. And how important really art and culture and all these things still are during these periods of crisis. So COVID-19, as you all may know or not know, that, you know, kind of the saying is, white America gets a cold, Black America gets the flu. It impacted Black and brown communities in disproportionate numbers. And so one of the things David reached out, and we're talking about how do we keep community involved? How do we talk about things during this period when people are feeling isolated, alone, and we're all struggling with this pandemic, is we started talking about programming. And as we all got familiar with Zoom and webinars, kind of put on a program called COVID-19 and the impact in the Black community. And we were able to get city councilors on board, doctors, and community members that have been doing work, you know, the whole time. And it was a really great conversation. So we were able to offer that and talk about the disparate impact it was having in the Black community. So that was helpful and very supportive. And it gave us more visibility because a lot of people were signing up for Zooms because you're at home, right? And so you're staying at home. So it was an opportunity that I talked about with David. This is a great opportunity. We can actually reach more people. It's accessible for a lot of people who can't just get out. So that was one of the ways the Worcester Black History Project, understanding that we are documenting now, and this is historic. And in this moment, these recordings are historic and we'll have this for posterity. And so that's how we have been collaborating and thinking about what is happening in the moment. I know we'll get to anti-Blackness in a little bit, but then our programming is geared toward what is relevant right now and what is happening in our city that we want to record, we want to document, we want to have people be able to refer back to. So in the moment, it's so important. to have those discussions. So that is the way in which we have been, tailoring our programming, our events right now, and looking at how we can provide those to the most people, from a virtual platform. So folks attending is the way they can support folks like you, Worcester Black History Project, to get information about events that are happening is a way to support, and definitely donating is a way to support. So we can do all those things now.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I follow up with what Deb said. From the museum's perspective, the conversation started immediately. So, okay, how do we document this? How do we participate in chronicling history as it's happening, which is a really tough thing to do because there's so many things happening at once, and we are a limited staff. So we created a website, worcesterhistory.org/COVID. And what we're doing is we're chronicling the community experience here in Worcester as it happens. So we've had over 200 submissions from community members so far in participating. So it ranges from poetry to, simple excerpts of, we received sort of the life of a person who had passed away from COVID, some detailed information. And we created a collection for the Worcester Black History Project, in which we're going to be submitting all of these conversations that are taking place right now. So the Worcester, impact, the COVID impact on the Worcester Black community is one of the conversations that has been archived so far. And we're up and creating a YouTube channel similar to what you're doing here, so that people have access to these conversations. And so it's been hectic and really busy, and trying to get it all documented and get people to participate, reaching out to universities and students and elders, and trying to collect the story as much as we can as it's happening.
Thank you so much, David. It's great. It's a great initiative. Al, can you tell us how the LGBT Asylum Task Force is doing in response?
Certainly. So, just like with everyone else, right, we've been really forced to change the way in which we operate. In addition to doing the very important life-saving work of supporting the asylum seekers, right, a huge part of it, of course, is fundraising, right? We have to fundraise roughly $32,000 per month. And as a result, we're always out there hosting fundraisers and going to different locations and speaking at events. Because we're not able to do that, right? We've had to kind of rethink the way in which we're operating. So we're going to more virtual events. But in addition to all of that, we are actually finding ourselves having to reach out even more to the asylum seekers, right? So imagine already folks have a hard time coping with the stress of not being allowed to work and to be productive, right? Sometimes, like I said, up to 2 years, right? And so for the most part are sitting at home, and even more so not being able to volunteer in person at various locations. And so we've had to have regular scheduled Zoom interactions with our folks, just to make sure that their mental well-being and mental health is being taken care of. And we've had to, going back to our fundraisers, right? So we've had to go to Zoom fundraisers. We've had to change the way in which we're actually planning our major fundraiser of the year. We're usually meet in person and have about 600 people there. What we're going to have to do is to do a virtual gala in September. And folks can definitely check our website, lgbtasylum.org, to find out ways in which they can support that effort, right? The need out there is huge, and we certainly need as many people as possible to be a part of that.
Thank you so much, Al. I think about the organization a lot, especially in this climate of heightened anti-Blackness and xenophobia and this kind of nativist moment that's with asylum under attack, with immigration under attack, this incredible, all these things just colliding that must make all of this so incredibly difficult. Thank you so much, Al. I know that these questions blur a little bit, and that's of course the point. So I want to focus more specifically now on anti-Black violence. So if we think about police brutality and of course the murder of George Floyd and so many others, Breonna Taylor, and unfortunately so many more, the calls for social justice and Black liberation in the United States and beyond, I wonder if we could all speak a little bit about what we see as the role of cultural institutions, like the ones that you all belong to and are doing such incredibly important work for, in the fight for social justice. That is, what can these cultural institutions do and what role should they do? So maybe not just your organizations, but also broadly, those that aren't taking on these issues, that it's a call for action too. Should we start? I feel so bad that I'm always asking Debbie to start. Is that okay? Is this order working?
It works for me. Of course it works for me.
Thanks, Debbie.
So I'll go, yeah. So I see these t-shirts and I'm a real museum goer. I love art. And so I've seen a t-shirt, and you probably have also, that says, or the saying that museums are not neutral, that everything is political. I'm a political science major too, that's something else I do. But so everything really is political. And as Toni Morrison says, because I had to remember this, one of the things I missed immediately when COVID happened is that folks, it just seemed like everything shut down for a moment. And in my head, I was wondering, how are we going to document this time? And I need to hear from those people that I normally read, the artists and the, that are creating at this time. And as Toni Morrison said, this is the time that artists get to work. And so I think the same thing. And so in talking with David about the programming, so immediately there was COVID-19. And from my perspective, because I think about Black and Brown people right away, is how does this impact us? And so we need to talk about it. And the museum then becomes part of amplifying voices and being part of engaging in conversation, which is so important, because the silence is violence, as we say, and to not say something is unacceptable, right? So it was then, as we continue with Black and Blue, talking about Black police officers that work within what some of us consider inherently racist institutions, bringing that program, because that's real in real time, attending protests and documenting that through photographs is so important. And by doing that, by even posting that on your website, you're letting folks know kind of where you stand without taking or writing a statement. And so David and I have had these discussions at the time of George Floyd, which was magnified for very good reasons. Black folks have been lynched across this country forever, and probably every week something is, every day, every minute something is happening. But we actually saw the life leave the body of this Black man. And we saw this white, very real, was the visual of this white police officer with his knee on his neck. And he is taking his last breath. So how do we deal with the trauma of that? And that we must talk about, and we can't act as if it doesn't exist. And if you do, that's political. So the museum, because I, love it, I work with David, is that you have to, at some point, take a stand. And taking a stand means making that available, talking about it, not acting as if it doesn't exist. And at the same time, being careful not to use Black bodies and Black thought, intellectual thought, to your benefit, right? So we have recently, the most recent incident of this I read about yesterday is Tamir Rice and his mother and some of the community saying, yes, you're not going to use Black pain for your voyeuristic purposes. You will not use my son's death without my permission and permission of the community, but you cannot monetize our trauma, right? So these are all the things that go through my head, and I think about, and we talk about, and how you represent something and who is part of the conversation, even as we talk about Confederate monuments. More recently, I've been interviewed about Christopher Columbus. Is it high on my list of things as symbology, as things that we honor in this city? I tell city officials it's important because you're choosing who you honor. And a lot of us are not part of those discussions, but no, it's not history. Put it somewhere. We can rotate. I don't care what we can, but we need to be aware of how other communities see things. And when you don't engage them in those conversations, that discourse is not happening. We don't feel as if we are part of this great city that's experiencing a renaissance. So I'll stop there and let others jump in, but definitely there's a role to be played by all institutions.
So powerful. Thank you. Immediately I think of the mothers, right? From Emmett Till's mother to Trayvon Martin's mother, who have made that statement, right, very clearly, that this is, you will not capitalize on it's incredibly powerful. Thank you for that, Debbie. David.
Sure. Yeah. So we are having the conversation internally as well. How do we play a role in this? And the recent New York Times article about museums and social justice and what role do they play, right? So for me, where I'm coming from in my position, it's always kind of looking at what the museum has done in the past, and analyzing that and seeing where that work has taken us and put us into today's conversation. So the museum Worcester Historical Museum I was made, we were having the conversation about how we're going to approach all of this, and talking to our director, who's been in the position for 46 years and has worked with the community for many, many years. And he referred me to something that we did 25 years ago called Looking Back, Facing Forward, working with the Charles Houston program in documenting Black lives and the contributions of Black community members in Worcester. And so, I've been in this position for now 2 years, and Deb and I are now working together on this. And I kind of see it as, I take a back seat and I use my position in a way to amplify Black voices in Worcester through the Worcester Black History Project, attending the protests and learning about what is needed to be said and how you put that through a historical lens. So, my job is to bring in the historical perspective and the local perspective and compare it to what's happening nationally, so that we are able to see where we place ourselves in this conversation. So it's been really, it's been a lot. It is very intense at the moment for everyone involved, but I feel like we're extremely constructive in the way that we're approaching things, and we're having the conversations that are difficult to have, and seeing best how to then turn that into something that the public can be educated on in terms of its local history, because I think that that's the hardest part, is people don't understand the history that they have in their own cities, and how that compares to what we have as a country, and looking at everything that's happening, and we're not immune to that in Worcester. So these are the conversations that we're having, and these are the things that we're doing moving forward, working with Deb and the Worcester Black History Project.
Thanks so much. The idea of using history as a tool for education, and also that it's a reckoning, right? That this is part of the process to acknowledge the violence of the past too. Al,
and it's interesting, if I can't just 1 second here, because what it ties together, what you were talking about, Julia, what's happening now, the young activists, as we say, amplify young voices, they're coming to me and they're saying, hey, we weren't here even in 2015 at the race discussions, the race dialogues that Wistar had. Can you tell us about it? Can you join us? Can you tell us about the history of Black folks in Worcester? Because there's some things we don't need to reinvent the wheel, but I am seeing that let's listen to folks who have been there, done that. These things have happened. Nothing happens in a vacuum, really, it doesn't. And so to hear them come or to reach out to me and say, hey, can you be part of this teaching that we're doing so we can understand where we are, where we've been in Worcester. So I think it's a fabulous thing, and I'm sorry.
No, not at all. It's to hear and to see and witness the community coming together in this moment too is so powerful and necessary. Thank you for that. Al, I know that it's a slightly different form of cultural institution, but if you could tell us, your insight here.
Certainly. I mean, what Debbie and David said, right, is very important, right? You have to have these very important conversations with a focus on educating the public. But then also, right, on a broader scale, right, these cultural institutions need to realize the power and the privilege that they host, right? The fact that they have a lot more sway than many recognize, right? And it is not okay to be silent, right? We need to to get noisy, right? I mean, that's the only way in which we can actually work to dismantle these oppressive systems. We need to definitely place pressure on the gatekeepers to these systems, right, to make sure that there are meaningful changes, not just some band-aids that are placed over the issues, but actual meaningful changes. And if it is that they refuse to do that, then maybe we just need to get new gatekeepers. And I'll leave it at that.
This is something I think about so much. Thank you for that. And that exactly. And if the gatekeepers are, maintain gatekeeping in very strict and in ways that are not inclusive and are not meant to think about social justice and equity, yeah, that they need to go.
Very interesting because the equity conversation is the word equity is it's before it was equality and now it's equity, and that word is just so present right now, and it that's where I remain a little bit optimistic about what's happening. I can tend to be a bit pessimistic, but because you see everything happening, it's just so overwhelming. But when I hear in 2020 and maybe 2019, 2018, equity, I think to myself, this is what's happening. This is what we need. It's not about equality. It is about full equity at all levels.
Yeah, the shift is incredibly, even from equality to justice. I mean, it's an enormous leaps and bounds. So we have limited time, and I want to, if anyone has last minute thoughts before we quickly go to Q&A, we're a little over, but it's fine. We're doing, I don't ever want to stop this conversation. So if you have some last thoughts, maybe something that, websites or something that you haven't already mentioned or programming that you want to quickly plug, and then we'll go to Q&A. So for those in the audience, kindly do leave Q&A, and if we don't get time to do it here, I'll send them to the panelists after, and we could continue, the conversation there. Any last thoughts?
I just want to say, in terms of, when we're talking about this, and to Al's point, sometimes you need to change the gatekeepers and the folks that are having those discussions, because we can talk about and ask people, please, can you exhibit things that would bring other folks into these institutions? But as I talk to David all the time about, we sometimes need to change people who are making decisions. And that means your board of trustees sometimes, and you need to go out of your way and maybe recruit folks from different communities. Because it's not enough to do the labor, we also need to be in positions where we are making decisions. Right? Because then it just becomes you're doing the labor for this institution, and you have these projects that are giving you information and are being helpful, but we don't have a seat at the table. So it is important, as we are talking about all of this, and people are asking, what can you do? Definitely, as Al said, we all are struggling, and donations are always welcomed, and that's on the Worcester Historical Museum website for us. And following the protests and stuff, we saw a lot of white institutions and white folks, quite frankly, who said, I want to give money. What can I do? In forms of, I just call it reparations or something, but what can I do to be helpful? What do you need? And so that was very helpful, and hopefully we can continue to see that support. But it is important to get to the root of the problem a lot of times. So I think to Al's point, yeah, sometimes the gatekeepers need to be changed.
Thank you, David. David?
Donating to Worcester Black History Project. We have quite a few plans ahead, I would say, for what we're doing and the work ahead. And we realize that the momentum is here. And so we want to continue our work with that. And as Deb said, our next program is Black and Blue, and just be on the lookout for that, and contribute. And we will be looking for volunteers and all of these things as soon as things, become normalized again. So we have quite a few plans ahead.
Thank you. Al?
And I, again, invite folks to visit our website, lgbtasylum.org, right? Sign up for or email newsletters, sign up for assisting with our virtual gala and tuning into that, supporting the work that we do. And if I can just plug an extracurricular of mine, definitely visit queerthescene.com. It's an entity that's doing some very good work with the queer BIPOC community in Worcester.
Thank you so much. I've heard, I haven't had a chance to do much with, but I'm so excited for Queer the Scene as well. I know I've spoken to, thank you for that. We have one question and then we'll wrap it up, but if we could answer it very briefly, which is hard because there's so much good stuff here. It's coming from Rebecca Friedman, our director at the Wolfsonian Public Humanities Lab, and she wanted to thank you all for being here and said you could talk. I could talk to you for hours. She said, "My question: how do you imagine your work has been changed moving forward? Clearly, each of you has been engaged with these questions for a long time. Is this a kind of transformative moment in your opinions? Is there no going back?" She asks, and if you could just briefly address that. Whoever.
Al, do you want to go first on this one?
Sure.
The last question, I'll sure.
So, I mean, for sure, I don't see us going back to what was normal, right? I mean, in many ways, this is the new normal. The fact that we are interacting with our asylum seekers on a more regular basis, the fact that we are collaborating with all these other social justice seeking entities within our city, right, working closely with them throughout this period, I don't see that changing at all. And so, I mean, definitely, I think that this is in many ways, the new norm, and we'll find other innovative ways as well as we progress and move through this period.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we are having those nuanced conversations that we've been needing to have for a while. I don't think that we are going to go back to what we deemed normal. I think that the generation below myself, I don't think that they're going to allow for that. I really don't. I think that they are hungry for change, and they are demanding, and they're technologically savvy. So they are going to they're helping us drive the change as well. So I don't see us going back. And I think just observing the community of Worcester and how we're dealing with it and how we're grappling with really tough conversations within our community, but also linking arms and saying, no, we're not going back to that. I would say that, that is extremely motivating. And for a museum, these are the things that we live for. This is history in the making, and we are just trying to keep up with everything, literally.
Yeah. And I agree. Change, you can smell it in the air. It's just not, there's no going back to anything too much. And I think that really even started, Women's March in 2017, just with the new administration coming in. But this is a culmination of a lot of things, and folks are done. And so how we do the work is it's necessarily going to be different. There's sometimes helplessness, but there's never a hopelessness. And so even when I wake up some mornings, I'm just like, I can't do it. And then something will happen and someone will want to meet or talk, and kind of, we coalesce around issues, and that gives me so much hope. And there's a lot of energy, and I do sense that. So no, there's no going back to doing things the way they were. Too many things have been questioned. People, boots are on the ground, like folks are waiting for it, and a lot of us are just done. And as we said, beyond tired, but not so tired that we won't keep pushing forward. And moving forward. So yeah, this changed drastically our nation, our world, and definitely our city. And it's a good thing.
This has been I've been looking forward to this talk. I can't even tell you. And I'm sure that everyone here agrees. That thank you so much to the three of you for sharing your insight, your years of experience, your knowledge, for sharing that with us, that there's such a value in that, and that thank you so much. Debbie Hall, founder of the Worcester Black History Project, David Connor, Director of Community Engagement at the Worcester Historical Museum, and Al Green, Ministry Director of the LGBT Asylum Task Force. Thank you all three. Next week, please join us Thursday at 10 a.m. Where my colleague, this is Eastern time, where my colleague Rebecca Friedman the director of the WPHL, will interview Joel Hoffman of the Vizcaya Museum and Gardens. Until then, everyone stay safe and in solidarity. Take care. Bye.